of Ellis Island.
Good morning and welcome to Ellis Island. My name is Tom Bernardin and I'll be your tour guide for the next hour or so as we visit some rooms inside Ellis. 70% of all immigrants to America pass through the port of New York. So when you're talking about the largest free mass movement in the history of civilization, you're talking about the room that you're standing in right now. Not everybody who passed through the port of New York had to come to Ellis Island. And that's a very important fact. If you had money in Europe, you would have bought a first-class ticket or a cabin-class ticket, and you didn't have to come to Ellis. The steamship would pull into New York Harbor, and a medical inspector would board and go to the cabin-class people and give them a very quick medical examination. And if you didn't cough and die right on the spot, they would stamp your papers and they'd let you in. Because they figured if you had the money for an expensive ticket, you obviously could support yourself. And they didn't have to worry about you becoming a public charge. The passengers that had to come to Ellis were those that came in steerage. And you've probably all heard of that term before. It's the bottom part of a steamship, and it's underneath the waterline. There's no windows, no ventilation. The ceiling's 5 or 6 feet high, triple bunk beds. And the largest steamships could hold 1,500 to 2,000 passengers, and they would cram you in there. The sink that you washed your baby's diapers in, you had to wash your eating utensils in. And with the guy above you getting sick all over you on the trip over here, you could leave Europe perfectly healthy, but you could have easily contracted a contagious disease that would prevent your entry into America. Now I'm talking about 5,000 people a day. There was even a day in 1907, our peak year, that you had 12,000 people. So you can imagine the chaos and the confusion that went on here. People speaking as many as 25 different languages. Are there any questions? All right, follow me, please. This is the Great Hall, or the main registry hall. This is the room that you saw in the movie The Godfather Part 2, and also Hester Street. They weren't filmed in this room, but in a room that looked a lot like this. Now, the staircase that I spoke to you about downstairs entered this floor just where these middle benches are. At that time, this entire floor area was covered by a network of what I call cattle runs. Bars similar to those on the scaffolding, dividing the floor area into alleys and passageways. And the immigrant would have to stand there holding his children and his luggage and move down from one medical examination to the next. Well, they were taken out in 1911. They were considered inhumane. And the benches that you're sitting on now were put in their place. They would go through their medical examination at that end of the room. They would check their hair, their skin, their heart, their limbs and digits. And then they would give them the eye test. And that was the most dreaded examination of all. And I'll talk more about that later. But if you had anything wrong with you, the medical inspector always had a piece of chalk. And they had a whole code system worked out. And they would give your lapel an appropriate symbol. You'd be taken from the line and moved to this end of the room. There were cages lining this whole wall, and you'd be put into those cages, and you would have to stay there until there was a doctor ready to give you a further medical examination. But if you had no difficulty, and most of the immigrants did not, you would have moved down these benches until you came to this end of the hall. Along that wall, there was a row of legal desks. And behind each desk, there was a legal inspector. Beside him, there would be a translator. Well, that legal inspector had about 2 minutes to ask you a series of 29 questions. What's your name? Where do you come from? Why did you come here? How much money do you have? Where did you get it? Let me see it. Do you have any friends here, any relatives, anybody to sponsor you to come out here and take care of you? Are you an anarchist? Who paid for your passage? Did you contract for employment in Europe to work in America? Well, you had to be very careful and give the correct answer. Because if you gave the wrong one, you'd get an SI. Now that stood for the Board of Special Inquiry. And you were taken out of the line and put in cages, and when the board was available, they'd come and get you, and you'd have to do some pretty fast talking. The board was composed of 3 voting members, a stenographer and a translator. Most of the immigrants didn't have any difficulty. 80% of them got in and out of here the same day, 3 to 5 hours. Now, the legal inspectors that worked here, most of them were Irishmen, and they didn't have very much experience with long European names. So if you came through with a very long Russian name or a very long German name, they would cut your name in half, or they would make up a brand new name for you. Are there any questions? All right, follow me, please.